Your mother gave my wedding dress to Connie. Those words burned in my throat as I stood there, staring at my fiancé's face. I searched his expression for any sign of the outrage I was feeling, but all I saw was hesitation. At that moment, I felt my perfect world beginning to crumble. Let me start from the beginning. I am Sarah, 28 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I was living a dream life as a marketing executive in Chicago. Everything was going perfectly. I had a successful career, a beautiful downtown apartment, and most importantly, what seemed like a fairy tale romance with the perfect man. Timothy and I met 3 years ago in what felt like a scene from a movie. At a local cafe, I accidentally spilled my cafe latte on his crisp white shirt. Instead of getting angry, he laughed and asked for my number, and we had been together ever since. At least, that's what I thought until the wedding dress incident changed everything. When Timothy proposed to me, my family was overjoyed. My mother, father, and my sister Ashley immediately went into wedding planning mode. My mother even created a group chat for planning the wedding, and my phone was constantly buzzing with notifications every 5 minutes. One weekend during a family dinner, my mother brought up the topic while passing me the potatoes, asking if I had given any thought to the wedding dress. I sheepishly admitted that I hadn't started looking yet, being caught up with work and wedding planning. Ashley leaned forward in her seat, excitedly telling me about a boutique she had heard about downtown that we should visit over the weekend. Meeting Timothy's family was intimidating at first. His mother Jane was the epitome of country club refinement, with perfectly styled hair, designer clothes, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. His father Russell was kind but reserved, while his sister Connie was, well, intense would be putting it mildly. During our first meeting, Jane told me how delighted she was to welcome me into the family. I remember feeling so fortunate that this family seemed to embrace me so warmly. If only I had known then what I know now. The adventure of wedding dress shopping began with my mother, Ashley, and me touring bridal shops all over Chicago. I tried on countless dresses, but none of them felt quite right until I saw the dress. It was an exquisite off-shoulder lace gown that made me feel like a true queen the moment I stepped out of the fitting room. When my mother saw me in the dress, tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered my name and told me this was definitely the one. The dress was expensive, but I had been saving for my dream wedding, and this dress was absolutely perfect. The only issue was that our small apartment didn't have proper space to store it. That was when Jane made what seemed like a generous offer, telling me with her perfectly practiced smile not to be silly, and that I should store it at their house where it would be safe. I gratefully accepted her solution, but I soon noticed how Jane immediately took control of the situation, dictating where and how the dress would be stored. Looking back, I should have recognized these warning signs, but I was too caught up in the excitement of getting married. 2 months before the wedding, while planning our perfect ceremony, I decided to stop by Jane's house. I wanted to try on the dress again, take some photos for the bridesmaids, and do a final check. The moment I entered the house, something felt oddly wrong. Jane seemed unusually nervous, which was strange for someone who always carried herself so perfectly. She fidgeted with her hands as she told me she hadn't expected me to come by. My heart started racing as I headed toward the guest room where my dress was supposed to be stored. But the dress cover wasn't there, and the room had a different feel to it, having been rearranged. Trying to keep my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest, I asked Jane where my dress was. After an awkward silence that felt like it stretched like caramel, Jane answered that she had given it to Connie. I felt as if the world had tilted on its axis. I whispered, "What?" thinking I must have heard wrong. Jane continued in a voice as casual as if she were discussing borrowing sugar, explaining that since Connie had recently gotten engaged and loved my dress, and they were the same size, she thought it would be perfect for her. Just then, Connie burst into the room with a beaming smile, asking if her mother had told me the amazing news about Theodore proposing and her mother giving her my dress. I felt like I was trapped in some twisted nightmare. Through gritted teeth, I managed to say that this was not amazing at all, that the dress was mine, I had paid for it, and they had no right to take it. Jane's expression hardened slightly, though her voice remained honey-sweet as she told me not to be so selfish, explaining that Connie's wedding was before mine and I could simply find another dress. The situation escalated quickly, with Connie calling me dramatic while Jane kept insisting she was just trying to help both her daughters. The word daughters hit me like a slap across the face. I wasn't even their daughter yet, and at that moment, I wasn't sure I wanted to be. Just then, Timothy walked in, probably having heard the raised voices. He looked around at us with confusion, asking what was going on. I desperately told him that his mother had given my wedding dress to Connie, hoping he would take my side, praying he would understand how wrong this situation was. Before Timothy could answer, Jane intervened, calling him her dear son and explaining that she was only trying to help, that Connie needed the dress, and that I had time to find another one. I watched Timothy's face, expecting him to defend me, to tell his mother she had no right to give away someone else's property. Instead, he seemed to be considering her perspective. He carefully suggested that perhaps we could find a compromise. His words hit me like a physical blow. I repeated the word compromise in a voice so low I barely recognized it as my own. This wasn't just about the dress anymore, it was about boundaries, respect, and the family I was about to marry into. I watched as Timothy avoided my gaze while his mother and sister acted as if I were being unreasonable. In that moment, something inside me broke. I whispered that I couldn't do this anymore and grabbed my bag, heading for the door. I could hear Timothy's weak voice calling after me, begging me to wait, insisting we could fix this, but I was already gone. I drove away with tears streaming down my face, watching as the perfect family I thought I was joining showed their true colors. The man I was supposed to marry couldn't even stand up for me. I finally had to pull over because my tears had blurred my vision so badly that I couldn't drive safely anymore. Sitting in my car, staring at Chicago's skyline through the windshield, one question haunted me: what should I do now? The days following the dress incident were a whirlwind of tears and confusion. I retreated to my old childhood bedroom, surrounded by posters and photos from a simpler time. My mother brought me tea and tissues, while my father paced the hallway, muttering about that woman and her audacity. One night, as I lay curled up in my old bed, my mother sat down gently beside me and took my hand. She quietly called me her precious daughter and asked me to think carefully about whether I really wanted to marry into this family. I called my best friend Lisa, desperately seeking some understanding. Through my sobs, I told her over the phone that I didn't even know who Timothy was anymore, how he had just stood there while his mother gave away my wedding dress. Lisa responded with undisguised outrage, telling me that it was crazy and that I deserved better, suggesting I postpone the wedding and take time to think. After sleepless nights and hours filled with memories and questions, I knew what I had to do. I sent Timothy a message saying we needed to talk and that I was postponing the wedding. He responded immediately and showed up at my parents' house within an hour, looking worried. He pleaded with me, saying we could fix this, offering to buy me any new dress I wanted. I shook my head, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and newfound resolve. I told him that this wasn't about the dress, but about respect, that his mother had taken something precious to me without permission, and he hadn't even stood up for me. Timothy ran his hand through his hair and apologized, saying he had been shocked and would talk to his mother to make her understand. I replied in an exhausted voice that this was exactly the problem, asking why we needed to make her understand something that was so obviously wrong. A few days later, Jane called, her voice dripping with false sweetness. She called me Dear Sarah and said she was so sorry about the little misunderstanding from the other day, explaining that she was just trying to help Connie, asking if I understood. I took a deep breath to steady myself. I told her no, I didn't understand, and what she had done was wrong. Her voice immediately hardened as she informed me that the dress had already been altered for Connie and there was no going back. I hung up the phone, feeling a mixture of anger and relief. At least now I knew exactly where I stood. Timothy's father Russell called for a family meeting, apparently confident we could resolve the issue. I reluctantly agreed to attend, though every cell in my body was screaming that this was a bad idea. The moment I entered the room, I could feel the tension in the air. Jane sat rigidly on the sofa, Connie sulked in the corner, and Timothy looked like he wanted to disappear. Russell cleared his throat and tried to keep things civil, asking everyone to calm down so we could discuss this rationally, acknowledging that he understood I was angry about the dress. I cut him off, explaining that this wasn't just about the dress, but about respect and boundaries. Jane rolled her eyes dramatically and sighed, telling me that I was making too much of a fuss and that Connie needed the dress. I felt rage bubbling up inside me as I exploded, demanding to know how she could say such a thing when it was my dress, one that I had paid for and chosen myself, something that held deep meaning for me. Connie let out a derisive laugh, dismissing it as just a silly dress while calling me self-centered. I searched Timothy's face desperately for any sign of support, but he only averted his gaze and mumbled something about finding a compromise. That was my breaking point. I stood up, my voice trembling but firm, declaring that there would be no compromise and that I wouldn't attend a wedding without the dress I had chosen and bought, adding that I was beginning to think we shouldn't have a wedding at all. Jane gasped in mock surprise, asking if I was really going to destroy a relationship over a dress and calling me childish. I met her gaze steadily and told her I was simply removing myself from a toxic situation where neither my feelings nor my possessions were respected. Timothy finally spoke up, his voice filled with desperation, begging me not to do this and insisting that we loved each other. I felt a wave of sadness wash over me as I questioned our love, asking him if love shouldn't include respect and support, neither of which I felt from him anymore. The room descended into chaos as Jane and Connie accused me of being selfish and dramatic. Russell tried to calm everyone down, but Timothy just stood there, seemingly torn between his family and me. In that moment, I made my decision. I removed my engagement ring and placed it on the living room table, telling Timothy that I was sorry, but I couldn't marry him under these circumstances. A deafening silence filled the room as Timothy's face crumbled. He pleaded with me one last time, but I was already heading for the door. As I left, I heard Connie's satisfied voice declaring that the dress was finally hers. My hands were shaking as I got into my car, yet strangely, my heart felt calm. My chest ached, but I knew that no matter how painful it was, this moment would stay with me as the time I chose myself. The weeks following my breakup with Timothy were an emotional roller coaster. Although I had decided to move forward, there were moments when the weight of what I had lost threatened to overwhelm me. But my family and friends gathered around me, offering their constant support. They never stopped reminding me of my worth. Lisa kept taking me out for girls' nights, insisting that I needed to rediscover myself. At work, I threw myself into a major project, channeling all my emotions into creativity. During this time, I heard that Jane was spreading rumors about me. Apparently, I had become the gold digger who trapped Timothy only to cruelly abandon him. While these stories hurt, I refused to let them break me. I wanted no part in their drama, letting my silence speak volumes. As time passed, the day of Connie's wedding arrived. I tried not to think about her wearing my dress, focusing instead on spending a relaxing weekend with my sister. But drama had a way of finding me. My phone buzzed with a message from my friend Molly, telling me I wouldn't believe what had just happened at Connie's wedding. Curiosity got the better of me, and I called her immediately to ask what had happened. Molly responded with an excited voice, telling me to brace myself for what she was about to share. Apparently, Jane had been causing major problems throughout the wedding preparations, constantly overturning decisions made by Connie and her fiancé Theodore. On the wedding day itself, Jane tried to rearrange everything for the ceremony. I couldn't help but laugh in disbelief when I heard she was trying to change things on the actual wedding day. Molly told me that Jane was demanding the seating arrangements be redone. Theodore finally reached his breaking point, Molly explained, and he exploded, telling Jane that it was their wedding, not hers. He then unleashed all his pent-up frustrations about how Jane had been controlling everything. The most interesting part, according to Molly, was that Connie took Jane's side. Connie defended her mother, saying she was just trying to do what was best for them. That was when Theodore said he was sorry, but he couldn't marry into this family, and everything descended into chaos. Then, remarkably, Connie tried to blame me, telling everyone none of this would have happened if I hadn't been so selfish about the dress. I couldn't help but laugh. I thanked Molly for telling me, admitting that while it was quite a story, I was honestly glad to be an outsider to all that chaos now. A week later, Timothy called me. He apologized, saying he finally understood how toxic his family was, and asked if we could talk. I took a deep breath and thanked him for his apology. But I told him it was too late, that I had moved on, and that he needed to work on himself before being in any relationship. He quietly agreed, telling me he had started therapy and just wanted me to know that I had been right. A year flew by, and I was doing well. My career was thriving, and I had started dating again, nothing serious, but it felt good to give myself another chance. From what I heard from friends, Jane's social circle had shrunk as people finally grew tired of her controlling behavior. Connie was having problems too, unable to break free from her mother's influence or maintain lasting relationships. I was grateful for the strength I had found in myself. I was thankful to have escaped problems that were never mine to bear. I was excited about my future. While standing up for myself had been a difficult decision, it had led me to a life filled with respect, love, and genuine happiness. Looking back, I realized that sometimes the hardest decisions lead us exactly where we need to be. That wedding dress was beautiful, yes, but my self-respect was worth so much more. What would you have done in my position? Would you have confronted Jane and Connie more directly? Or do you think my decision to remove myself from this toxic situation was the right one? Please share your thoughts in the comments below about how you protect yourself in family dramas and difficult situations. If you enjoyed my story, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to us and helps us create more engaging content. Thank you for watching.